Welcome back to another episode of our Eagle Perspective podcast. I'm Mike Siciliano, principal of the high school. I could not be more excited to welcome our two new wellness counselors, Kaylee Underhill and Phoenix Jasmine. We're excited to have you join us. Thanks so much for being here on the podcast.
We're excited.
Thank you.
So I know, you are experts in all things counseling and you deal a lot with anxiety. So we figured the first thing we'd do with you is put you on a podcast, that is filmed just to kind of put you to the test,
Here we are.
Yeah. So
kidding.
no, I'm kidding. This is a big new program for us. It's something we've actually spent close to 3 years figuring out how to do. And I know there's lots of questions about it. So I'm pretty excited today to get into what is counseling, what is wellness counseling here at Santa Fe. I'll ask you some common questions. But to start, I'd love to have you guys just kind of introduce yourself a little bit about your background as a counselor, but also your faith background and kind of how you got connected with Santa Fe. So Kaylee, why don't you start us off?
Great. I actually had the opportunity to go to Santa Fe as a student, so that this is a really exciting opportunity for me to be back on campus with people that a lot of familiar faces. I keep running into familiar faces. I studied actually health sciences I went to Baylor for part of my undergrad and then Cal State San Marcos. Then really found I was doing physical training with athletes and with clients and ended up always sitting down with them having conversations about how they got to where they are and how their family dynamics work. And that
People were coming to physical therapy for the other actual counseling.
Turns out we weren't getting much working out done.
Yeah.
And a lot of that actually fed into some of the habits related to their health and their wellness. So I started looking at more of a holistic overall approach towards wellness and got very fascinated in the psychological side of it. So I went back to school and at Fuller Seminary, and that's where I got my master's in marriage and family therapy, met my husband, and have been practicing since in a few focuses. Couples, I started with eating disorders, so I worked for a few years with that as my specialty, and then moved more into trauma focus and individuals, and really have now, most of my clients are now teens, kids, and that's been something that a population that I love working with.
Yeah. Well, we should probably note we're not offering couples therapy at Santa Fe.
Yes.
But we've referred you, I know, a number of students, and I know because of confidentiality, which we'll get to, you can't even tell us that that's true, but we know from some of our families, for both of you actually, who have had really, really good things to say about you. So we're thrilled you're here. And I maybe should note, you come by the interest in psychology pretty honestly, in that your mom is also a counselor,
True.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And my grandfather, so it runs in the family.
Third generation.
Yep.
There's probably a lot of people watching or listening who know the name Susie Loomis.
Yes, that is my
your
mother.
mom. Yeah,
Yes.
Who's helped a ton
She's
of people in our
a
community.
local celebrity.
Yeah, pretty much. I bet she cannot walk anywhere.
Nope.
Yeah. Okay. That's going to be
She
you
knows
two
everyone.
soon too, by the way. So, all right, Phoenix, how about you?
Yeah. It's a big question. A little bit about me. So I'm from Texas originally. I ended up, my first year, I went to a community college near Texas A&M because I did not know where I wanted to go to school at the time. And ended up looking up, I was asking around, I really want to go to a Bible college in California. That was kind of my dream. And without even knowing about the school that I ended up later attending, someone had mentioned Biola University, and they were like, it's a great Bible college. And so I ended up not even visiting the school. I just applied. I knew I wanted to be in California. I knew I wanted to go to a Bible school. I knew I wanted to study psychology, and it had kind of checked all those boxes. So I ended up going to Biola, and I guess a little I don't know, fun fact. The reason I kind of was interested in psychology originally is I was in high school and I had a Psych 101 teacher, and he loved, he was a therapist himself, and he loved psychology, loved studying the mind and the brain. And so that was when I first was interested in it. Went to Biola. That's where I got my undergrad degree in psychology, and I loved it. I ended up working at a couple pro-life pregnancy clinics in the area, and I served there, and got some community service hours completed there, but I just like fell in love with sitting in the room with really with women who were in unplanned pregnancies, were very scared, were very just not knowing what to do and next steps.
It can be a pretty upending thing for your life.
Yes. So to sit with them in like a very vulnerable time and hear their story, it kind of confirmed even more that I really wanted to be a therapist. And then, as a therapist, when you're in your undergrad, you know that you have to go on to get your master's. So I ended up graduating there, and I went to Alliant University to get my my master's degree in marriage and family therapy. And I worked in a low-income agency for a little bit, and I across the board I did play therapy, and then all the way up to saw some elderly. And I loved it, but I kept gravitating towards preteens and adolescents, and I wasn't something that I ever really saw coming, but I just felt like God kept placing me in these opportunities to like really sit with teenagers. And my first job out of school was working at a private practice with a bunch of women in San Clemente, incredible women in San Clemente, and worked with adolescents there and some young adults. And then now I work at my private practice in Carlsbad, primarily with adolescents. I do see some young adults too. Similar to Kaylee, I am trained in EMDR, which helps address trauma, like unprocessed trauma, and heal from that. And so I incorporate that a little bit into my therapy. I use a model called IFS, which really looks at what Kaylee was sharing, like a multifaceted approach to we're made up of just a lot of different parts, and looking at each of those components. And that's a little about me.
And you're both part of a Christian counseling collective.
Yes.
It's called Inspire, right? And
Correct.
so that is a group of specifically Christian therapists, which I think is important in this conversation. And I think part of what we'll talk about is there's a lot of different things going around right now about counseling. There's maybe a little bit of historical skepticism sometimes amongst Christians. So I'm going to start with what seems maybe like a really basic question. But what is counseling?
Really, the basics of counseling, it's just a place to share your pain, your struggles, process, again, pain, hurt. I think everyone could benefit from it. I've had it myself. I've participated in therapy, and it can just be a beautiful thing for someone to have a unbiased person kind of just hear what you've been going through. And I think it's, for me anyways, not only is it talking about the present, but working towards the future and how you can move forward and grow and heal.
I think there are some Christians in particular who would say, as long as you're participating in the right daily spiritual practices, which we all believe in, scripture reading, prayer, fellowship, worship, shouldn't that, if you're doing all that, or if you're just releasing things to God, why do you need counseling? And I'm asking, just for the record, I mean, I have participated in a lot of counseling, dealing with some things in my life, so I'm for it. But I think I've run into that, even as we talk a little bit about this program. So, and maybe a better question is, in what ways does it actually coincide with those other spiritual practices, or help exemplify them, as opposed to being something else?
Yeah. Similar to what Phoenix was describing with the IFS approach. So we talk a lot about different parts of ourselves, and I fully believe that God made us to be multifaceted beings, that all of these parts of us, psychological, emotional, relational, physical, they all blend together and can work together. However, when any of them are kind of out of sync, that shows up in ways that cause some disorder or chaos in our lives. And so having a place to come and process through what that chaos and disorder is, and learn how to integrate the different parts of ourselves. I don't think in any way that takes away from what God brings or how he designed us to be, but instead allows us to walk more fully in that. So giving us a space to kind of open that up and look at what's going on and process with someone out loud can help bring that integration more fully as we are just navigating different parts of life. So it would never be considered a substitute for your faith, but instead a way to access parts of yourself that are maybe closed off due to some pain, trauma, chaos, lack of awareness. And so it can bring some more awareness and openness there.
Or maybe even lack of, like you use the term, a neutral person, right? Lack of somebody with some expertise who's seen a lot of this to be able to just verbalize and figure out what's going on in your head, which for teenagers especially right now is really difficult. I mean, one of the things I talk about is when I was in a fight with somebody growing up, I would go home. I had lots of time to think about, I'm going to see them tomorrow and what will I say? I would go through being angry. I'd go through being scared. I'd go through this whole range of things, but I'd have a plan by the morning, right? Now the fight follows them home. Their friends are all talking to them about it on text. They're still fighting with the person right before they go to bed and right when they wake up. It seems almost more important than ever that if we get into some more serious situations, there's both a time and space where you have to sort of, okay, what's happening, right? And a neutral person to be able to explain those things to. And maybe get some counsel, So, okay. With that in mind, I mean, I'll speak a little to why we're starting this. I think for years, we have believed in counseling, but we've always referred out. And, you two have been on our list. I think what we found post-COVID is a couple things, and I'm curious if this coincides with what you're finding. The issues around mental wellness have all accelerated quite dramatically as far as conflict resolution or lack of it, coping skills, general malaise, anxiety, depression, reliance on technology. So I wonder if you could speak to why that is. And part of the context of this question is, I think as adults, we are always looking at, the generations after us a little bit and being like, are we just overdiagnosing things? Are we just all soft now, And maybe some of that's true, but it also feels like maybe there's also a different set of inputs than before. So maybe you could speak to why you think that there's so many more cases of this.
My first thought with that is I like to bring it back to even the way God designed us to be is to be in community, to be in fellowship, to be in nature, to have people that we trust around us, to do things that are challenging. Those are all things that He designed us to be a part of in order to thrive. The substitute has become social media, phones,
Netflix,
right. A lot of screens and a lot less connection. So connection really is a foundational piece of therapy, building and restoring connections, both with yourself, with God, and with the people around you.
Yeah. It just seems like there is more of a need for it than ever. When we've referred out, more and more counselors are already booked,
right,
or can't work with insurance or whatnot. I don't know if you can validate that that's true in your practices as well. So that's part of why we're trying to bring this on campus. It is a pilot. So, I know you were both here at our back to school nights, and it's like you got a lot of, how do I get on the list? So the interest is definitely there. So why don't we start specifically with our program? Maybe you guys can explain a little bit about what the goals are and how it works.
I don't know if this is going to answer the question fully, but to your point, I think it's going to be an amazing opportunity for students to have convenient access to counseling, because things happen. Every day is a new day with its own challenges. And so I think especially with teens, I think to be able to have quick access to counseling and to talk to someone then instead of waiting, because there are waiting lists for insurance, even if you're not using insurance, they can be really long, and 2-3 months pass by and there's a new set of things that have come up. So I just think that that's going to be really important to have us here.
And you're each going to be here one day a week to start.
Yep.
right? We should note too a couple things, because I know some of our parents will be watching, so we've made sure to say this. We are recognizing this is new. Number one, the parents are the gatekeepers to you.
Yep.
So let's talk about how that works. We have a referral list, and you can get on the referral list a number of ways. It is possible for a student to put themselves on the list, like, hey, I'm interested in this. I have an issue that needs some dealing with. A parent can call and or use a form to put a kid on a list, or an administrator can refer a student. We're actually not, and we talked about this, we're not having teachers refer students, because it might be weird for parents to get a phone call that says, well, your teacher thought that maybe,
Sure.
So we're not doing that. But regardless, a student gets on the list. What happens next?
We call the parents. So even if a student were to refer themselves, the parent will be the first point of contact, and then we will schedule with them directly. So they'll never be in the dark about if their child is interested in counseling.
Right. There's no secret counselor meetings. It's not a drop-in. It's not, and we should say this too, it's not I'm having a tough day, I want to go sit with the counselor.
This is something, as the community gets to know us and some of the things that we spend a lot of time focusing on and talking about. One of them for me is certainly going to be empowering parents. I firmly believe that parents play a massive role in the lives of their kids. And so I never want to undercut or discredit that relationship. And if anything, my role is going to be to encourage strength and closeness in that bond and in that relationship, and also be a resource for parents to come to be able to talk through what's going on with their kid and how can I approach this, and also just empower them as parents that they don't have to, that they can trust their instinct and they are capable of speaking into their kids' lives, and we're here as support. But you'll hear me talk about this a lot, I'm sure, as I'm here, but parents are awesome and we are on their team. And that's something that I really want to just make very clear.
Yeah. Which obviously fits well with our parent partnership model. So we're really grateful for that. And I mean, I think people may not realize all the lengths that we went to find you two, and to get you two, and whether it's our statement of faith, or just your commitment to that parent partnership and to our values. So we're super thankful. On that note, here's, and I know we didn't get to the last question. We'll get there. But you talk about the parent partnership piece. Let's talk a little bit about confidentiality, because I think that is something that parents both worry about and maybe feels a little counter that partnership sometimes. Like, wait a second, my kid is going to be telling something else. And there's a good and bad about this. We should make clear, anything that students tell you, you can't tell us, right? So if a student comes in and confesses that, whatever, they're wearing T-shirts to school. Okay, I'm picking something like super not... Well, it is a big deal if there's any kids watching, right? Like super not a big deal. Whatever they tell you, you can't run and tell us that legally.
Right.
Like you would lose your license if that happened. So let's put everybody at ease about that. And that's part of what we want. We want kids to be able to tell things to you that they wouldn't tell us, because we'd rather they have a Christian advisor working through that with them than have nobody, because they're scared of getting in trouble. Right. But two, there is confidentiality laws about what you can tell parents and what you can't. And some parents are uncomfortable with that. I don't know if you can speak to those parents about why those laws are in place and the good in that.
The confidentiality, especially for teenagers, is important because at this age, they often want to maybe protect their family or their parents. And so things might come up that they just feel like in their mind isn't something that they want to talk about. And so I think having what Kaylee said was excellent. We don't ever want to replace or undermine the parent's role at all. And I think we do want their children to be talking to them and communicating to them. And so for me, I guess I can speak a little bit about how I navigate this. For confidentiality, if they're ever in danger, if they're going to hurt themselves, if they're going to hurt someone else, if there's any safety risk, we are required and mandated to let the parents know about that immediately. So their safety is important. It's a priority for us. I think there's other, for teenagers, building a rapport and a trusting relationship. It's required to have some confidentiality there because in order for that to grow and foster, there has to be, especially teenagers, they're really smart. They can read if we're not being maybe.
I mean, either like they're going to know if you're saying you can tell me anything, and then you're running and telling their parents everything that they say.
Exactly. So we have to honor that with them, and in order for therapy to be most helpful for them, we've got to have that confidentiality so that they know they can tell us things. And I do think for me, Kaylee maybe has a different approach on this, but I always tell my clients that I'm working with, I say, hey, if this is something that I think mom and dad should know about, do you want to talk to them about it? Do you want us to do it together? Ideally, we do it together. Or do you want me to talk to them? Because I think there are things that parents should be in the loop on. And again, what Kaylee said, we're a team and working together, and we're just partnering with them. We're working alongside them.
Yeah.
And so, yes, having that space to talk through things is great. But at the end of the day, therapy is not going to be forever, and we're not always going to be there. And so we want to help create certain patterns where their child feels comfortable. Maybe not even comfortable. It's okay if they're not comfortable, but they can go and talk to mom and dad about what's going on, because we won't be there forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which in some ways is the goal.
Yes.
Right. I think that's important to state too, of, the goal isn't, while therapy, certainly people can use it all the time. I've used it at various points in life, but the goal is not that every week for the rest of your life, you need to have an appointment, correct? Like there's a level of independence that's a good thing.
I always say the goal of therapy is to not need therapy anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even though it is a gift and it's always available to you. You can always, have counseling. And
You said something interesting there too, which I would love both your takes on, because there is a lot of stuff out there right now, about sort of over counseling, people being dependent on counseling. There's a book called Bad Therapy that came out recently that's gotten a lot of press, which I think, I know in our conversations, I think we've all agreed there's some really good points in that particular book. I'd love just for you to hear your response to some of those things that have pointed out, like, I know the book talks about, are we overemphasizing our feelings, for example, and telling everyone that whatever they feel is the truth? Is that what counseling is? Maybe a couple things like that you could share.
I wish I could say it as eloquently as some of the, people I've listened to, but the idea of overemphasizing feelings in creating that can lead to more of a fragility mindset of, we only do things that feel good or feel okay or that I want to do. Becoming aware of your feelings is helpful, and it can inform some things, but creating a goal where the feeling determines the behavior is actually not helpful for a kid, for an adult, and it leads to more of a fragility mindset where everything feels scary and everything feels hard, and
therefore I shouldn't do it.
Right, unmanageable. Yeah. I can't go to class. I don't want to go to this job interview. I don't want to do this interview right here, but here I am doing it. So the idea behind that bad therapy mentality is creating a hyper focus on feeling as an indicator of what needs to be done or how you handle a situation. The approach that I take with kids is certainly more towards the resilience mindset. So this is how we're feeling. We can become aware of that. We can say that out loud and acknowledge that that's there. How can we now create steps to show ourselves that we're strong enough, brave enough, resilient enough to do it anyways? Get enough support around us or expose ourselves to it in small ways so that we can build up to doing really powerful, incredible things. So making the world bigger for us rather than creating a very small world based on fears and anxieties and how we're feeling.
You said that beautifully. Very eloquent, actually.
Wow, thank you.
You guys are so encouraging to one another. My goodness.
Strengths based.
Yeah. I also think, though, bringing God into that too, that's why I'm so thankful to work at a school, to be at a school that aligns with our values biblically, because we can bring the Holy Spirit into that too. He comforts us. He strengthens us. He can empower us to do the hard thing. And yes, I think it's important to recognize our feelings and sit with that. But I think being comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes, because that's life. And I think even as an adult, I'm learning there's things that I don't want to do, but I do it anyway because it's the right thing. And I think God will go with me too and give me the strength. And so that's kind of our mentality.
Yeah, I love that, because I do think some people who are maybe critical of counseling think of, well, counseling is just catering to whatever you're feeling.
Right.
And so this resiliency building mentality of using it to actually do the opposite is pretty cool. I mean, I'll just share. I remember when I was in my 20s, I think, when my counselor said, your feelings aren't always the truth. It was kind of like, wow, I hadn't thought about it that way. So, that's pretty neat. Okay, circling back to, therefore, who's a good candidate for this at Santa Fe? And I'll say we have all the things here, right? You mentioned eating disorders. We certainly have that here. We have all kinds of family issues and challenges here. What does this look like as far as who's the right fit for using you on campus, and how long they see you for, and maybe kind of walk through some of that?
I think there's markers to look for sure. And I shared this a little bit at the meet and greet night, that if you're noticing that your kid there's a shift in their behavior or their mood, or they're not feeling motivated to do the things that they love, or they're not enjoying the things that they typically do, even like not wanting to go to soccer, and they love soccer, and they, those are things to just be aware of. And I think parents are already alert for, looking out for those things. I do want to note that, again, to encourage and empower parents that they can handle those situations. And I think that they can be an available resource for their child and help them through those moments. But if you're starting to see that it's prolonged, there's like a long
becoming debilitating.
Yes. And you can look at grades too. Grades are maybe going down, those kind of things, because parents know their kids best. So we only see them for a small amount of time. Parents see them all the time. And then I think outside of that, there's like certain things that happen, of course, in life. Life is hard. There's challenges, family dynamics, and every person in the family unit is going to experience those hardships differently. And so you never know what, there might be a kid that looks fine on the outside but is really struggling. And so just keeping an eye out for, change and stress and how it's impacting your kid.
And this could also be relational dynamics between students as well.
Yeah.
A hope would be to bring multiple students in at a time and talk through conflict resolution and communication, how to share what you're feeling or experiencing in a way that can be received well. So that's another aspect. And also it's better to come and we'll do an assessment and talk through, okay, here's what we're seeing. Let's come up with some goals together and a plan on what that would look like to accomplish these goals. And that can sometimes be, so there's not really like a one answer. It could sometimes be they just want to come in for one session because there's something that's stuck in their brain that they're trying to figure out. It could look short term. It could be more long term. So there it could be a lot of different things. And the nice thing is we get to know them and we can assess and make a plan from there.
And there may be times where you recommend, hey, this needs to be longer term. So, we recommend actually you go off-site. I know our program we've said is up to 10 sessions per year. But that doesn't mean that, if it needs to go longer, that can't happen elsewhere. I love that you mentioned the conflict resolution and the potentially bringing, kids in. I would say that is something we have had here a lot of. A social group goes through something and kids suddenly want to leave because they feel like there's just no path forward. And in actuality, there might be multiple paths forward, right? And it's kind of that fight or flight. And it feels like teenagers right now, again, I don't know if you're seeing this in your practice, but are in a big flight mode.
Right.
And sometimes having those interventions can be super helpful. So let's say there's a student who is thinking about, okay, maybe I do want to see the wellness counselor, but maybe they're a little scared. They don't want anybody to know. What advice would you give them or their parent in that situation?
I did have a parent ask me this. I think the mom or dad can help them with that. They have access to their referral just as much as the student does. So first telling mom and dad, hey, and talking that through, because we're going to be calling mom and dad anyway, so they're going to know about it.
But just to be clear, if for some reason they didn't, they could go to the wellness counseling tile, fill out the referral form, and then you would reach out to the parent. And
Right.
I'll say this again. Nobody has that list except for you guys. Like, we don't publish that list. It's not like all their friends are going to know. So, yes.
I think it's good to note that this is new. Our goal is going to be safety, confidentiality, making it available and comfortable for students. So we're trying everything we can, and we can adjust as we go. But with, a private entrance, and it won't be advertised in class. It would be just an excuse note.
Yeah.
So as much as we can on our end, we're trying to keep it confidential. So no one needs to know that they're coming. It's not going to be advertised anywhere. It won't be announced in class.
Yep.
So the goal is that people don't know.
Yeah. And we're going to attempt as best we can to schedule things during study hall, lunch, before school, after school. There might be some times where it is during class, especially depending on what's going on. But really, it's pretty possible to go through it all without, everybody knowing about it.
When we see the students too, because we're on campus, we're here. It's not like a off-site location. So I do think it's important to, if any students are listening, that if we see them, we're not going to initiate and wave and come up to them and say, hey, how you doing? How was, school? How was lunch?
Yeah.
They have to initiate. So if they wave, they come up to us, they're welcome to do that. I always tell people, I'm not being rude, I'm not ignoring you, but I want to protect their privacy and I want to honor their privacy. And so if they don't want to come talk to us or say, hey, they don't have to.
Yeah. They can pretend like they have no idea who you are.
Yeah. We're not offended. It's fine.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't want this to be a place where it's a punishment.
Yeah.
Like they did something wrong, so then they have to go to the wellness counselors, and we are going to fix them. That is in no way the goal. It's we're a resource. We want to be here to support and be a resource. So for it to not be seen as like not Scary Christy or.
You were about to say the principal's office.
I was.
There's lots of people that come to my office just to hang out. I'd like to point that out. But I think it is a really good point. It's probably good maybe for some parents to hear too. Like, this is not a guarantee that, we're fixing kids.
Right.
Right. I think all of us have things we have to deal with, and there are resources and tools of which you are graciously being one. But ultimately, that person has to make some changes a lot of times. And there's certainly no guarantee of that.
Right. And a lot of our training and our expertise is in knowing what resources to pull on and who to get people connected to. So that could be external support. That could be support groups. That could be more intense, like inpatient therapy or outpatient therapy. So a lot of our knowledge is just knowing how to get people the support that they need, where someone else might not know those things and have access to those things. So.
Well, thank you both for being here. I feel like it'd be remiss. We haven't mentioned Christy Ellis's name yet on this podcast. And she's our middle school assistant principal, for people who don't know, but she has really largely been the driving force the past couple years behind making this happen and has done a ton of work. So shout out to you, Christy Ellis.
Yep.
And thanks to the both of you for partnering with us in this and kind of taking a chance in being the pilot version of this. And I know the response has already been overwhelming. I mentioned earlier, you were both here at the back to school nights, and the lines at your tables were were long. So we're going to have to figure out how we make all this work. But I think it shows that the need is there, and we couldn't be prouder to have you both. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're excited.
Yeah. Well, good. We are too. Thanks for joining us. If this is your first time watching or listening to an Eagle Perspective podcast, we have lots of other episodes. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or elsewhere podcasts are available. You can watch our video podcasts on YouTube. We look forward to seeing you again soon.